You know, when you open your eyelids and look out at the world, somebody break this in half for me because I don't. Well, it went under the drum, so I'll be fine. When you open your eyelids and you look out at the world through those nickel sized openings in the front of your head, it's not really your eyes that are doing the seeing. Now, you wouldn't be able to see without your eyes, that's for sure. But at their most elemental level, your eyes are conduits. They are receptors. They are cracks through which the light shines in. Extraordinarily developed, supremely advanced conduits, without a doubt, but conduits all the same. Your eye has 2 million working parts. It is the most complex organ in your body except for your brain. But it is actually your brain that is doing the seeing. It is your brain perceiving, receiving, and arranging the images that pass through those tiny glass windows from the outer world. Now, Dr. Lisa Klein could elucidate this with much more precision than me. She is our resident optometrist, which I think is marvelous. She's also a yoga teacher. She can have you stretch out your back, quiet your mind, and recommend you for cataract surgery all in one visit. But my elementary understanding of the eye goes like this, and I have an image for you here. So, light enters the eye through the cornea, adjusted by the opening and closing of the pupil, that black center of your eyeball. The lens focuses the light onto the retina at the back of the eye, and the retina is just crammed full of photoreceptors called cones and rods. You have about 6 million cones and 120 million rods in each eye. And you have this high-tech marvel of nature and creation, these receptors miraculously converting light into electricity, into electric current, electric impulses. And then the optic nerve, made of another million individual flashing working ganglia, carries these electric impulses to the very back of your brain, the visual cortex in non-scientific terms. And that is where vision, perception, seeing actually takes place. So in ways we can't completely yet understand, as the two most complicated systems in the human body interact, your eyes are quite literally in the back of your head, while your shining receptors are in the front. And to me, it's just amazing. You are amazing. Now, I'd like you to do something right now, and it's not too intrusive, but maybe look to your neighbor and stare deep into those pupils and irises. Now, if you're looking at a person who has green eyes, if you have green eyes, raise your hand. Wow, so above the average here. If you have blue eyes, raise your hand. Incredible. If you have brown eyes, raise your hand. About 65% of the world has brown eyes. The rest of us are glorious minorities when it comes to our colors. Now, back to that person you're staring in the eyes. Just look at them and tell them you are an amazing creature. All right, I see that kissing and stuff. Stop all that back there. When vision fails, it can be anywhere along this almost magical passageway from the outer cornea to the visual cortex. It can be as simple as a cataract on the lens of the eye, which is the most common reason for blindness in the world, making everything cloudy. Macular degeneration at the center of the retina, a tumor on the brain, disease of the optic nerve. It can be the shape of the eye, causing either nearsightedness or farsightedness. It can be the thickening of our lenses with age, forcing us to reach for those reading glasses. It can be as severe as glaucoma or detachment of the retina, or as simple as astigmatism. If there is a dysfunction in that system, we can't see as well as we could, or we might not be able to see at all. I developed severe nearsightedness as a youngster. It was likely caused by my extended time spent in an incubator more than 50 years ago. Those incubators saved my life and my sister's life, but it was later, before physicians realized that all that bright light and saturated oxygen inside an incubation tube does long-term damage to the vision of premature babies. So I was wearing Coke bottle bottom glasses by the second grade. I know that's really hard to imagine, but it's true. By my young adult years, without glasses or contact lenses, I was essentially blind. I could not see the clock beside the bed without getting very, very close to it. And the trouble for me was that the light was all twisted and reflected improperly. My hoped-for baseball career would never materialize as a result of that. I could see the ball. If I broke my glasses, if I lost my contact lenses, I was essentially lost, stranded, having to be led around by hand. It was impossible to function without these. And then the most amazing thing happened. I once was blind, but then I could see. It was the invention of laser LASIK surgery. Thanks be to God for that. Here's how it goes. They give you a Valium, which is always a good way to start a procedure. They handcuff you to a chair so you cannot interfere. A flap is cut away from the outer cornea. An ultraviolet laser cuts away and reshapes the cornea. And yes, the smell in the air is your own optical tissue burning. The flap is put back into place and squeegeed down with a tiny little window cleaner. They put some gooey drops in your eyes. They raise you from the chair. They told me to look across the room about the distance from me to Rob, and they said, "Mr. McBrayer, what time is it?" I said, "It's 11:25 a.m." The first time in my life that I could look all the way across a room without corrective lenses to actually see the time. Cindy drove me home, as apparently, before I left, they gave me a second Valium. So Cindy drove me home, as apparently I spoke of individual leaves on the trees, not green globs. I read every roadside from a mile away just to prove that my vision was so good. And after a week or so of wearing dark shades and sleeping in a pair of goofy goggles, I had 20/20 vision. It's a miracle. And that vision has receded a little bit now with age, more than 20 years ago, but I'm hanging out at about 20/30, even if I now have to have reading glasses, driving glasses, and computer glasses, not to mention sunglasses. All of this to say that vision, your vision, is a miracle unto itself. Just to be able to see, to take in the world. We don't think about, you've maybe never thought about the fact that tens of millions of cones, rods, and nerve endings are converting light to electricity inside your head so that you can see the world around you. You don't get up and say, "Well, I hope all these parts work today." Well, when you get older, you do get up and say, "I hope all my parts are working today." But we take sight for granted, like breathing the air. We just breathe. We don't have to really think about it until it's threatened, until it begins to diminish, and then we realize that it is true. 80% of what we learn and perceive, 80% of the work your brain does is through your eyes. Mark 10:51, Jesus asked a blind man a question. I said it last week. Jesus is always asking questions when someone comes to Him. Always, it seems to be forcing the person to declare, to confess, to own their stuff. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked the blind man. And the blind man gives an answer that is different depending upon which translation of Mark's gospel you're reading. The blind man answers in our reading today, "I want to see Did you did you see what was on the wall? I want to see again. Half the English translations say, I want to see. Half the English translations say, I want to see again. So I found that really interesting that word again is there. Does it really matter? Because if this is someone who has never been sighted, in a sense, he can't even imagine what he's been missing out on, right? But if it's someone who once could see, but has lost his sight somewhere along the way, then it's a different kind of request. To me, it's more of a longing. It's this deep desire for restoration, for things to be back the way they were when life was so much better for this man. So I had to get my Greek lexicon down off the shelf to discover that adding the word again is in fact the better translation. Bartimaeus, the blind man in question, is asking for restoration of what has been lost. There had been a time when he could see clearly, before his corneas malfunctioned, before maybe the optic nerve was severed or the clouded lenses put him into complete darkness. I want to see again. But maybe I've jumped too far ahead. This is the part about the text that I really like. The only reason Bartimaeus gains an audience with the wonder-working optometrist that is Jesus of Nazareth is because he kept screaming his head off. Verse 47, when he heard that it was Jesus, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Obviously, Jesus' reputation has gone before him, and Anna, once again, right on cue, is right. Mark, in his short, punchy, pithy ways, is always showing us Jesus' powers. It's moving story to story, and here it is no different. This poor guy can't see, so he can't get to Jesus. He can only cause a scene. So he does, banging on and screaming bloody murder. And if you'll notice, everyone in the crowd is trying to get him to shut up. But he will not be silenced. He just gets louder, bolder, more forceful, and it causes Jesus to stop. Bring him here, Jesus says. And then the same crowd that was saying, shut up, they say, oh, it's your lucky day, let's go. They change sides fairly quickly. He makes his request. His sight is restored without Jesus doing a thing. Did you notice that? Jesus is just talking to him. Yes, it's Jesus' power. That's how Mark intends it. But there was something about Bartimaeus' dogged determination that contributed to his healing too. And Jesus called that faith. Your faith has made you well. And a good synonym sometimes for faith is just persistence. Do you know the parable about the old horse that fell in the well? Well, it happened. I don't know exactly how it happened, but it did. This horse falls down into the well. And the farmer comes out because he hears his horse neighing and whatever horses do besides neighing. What do they do besides neighing? Whinnying, thank you. That's good. Whinnying. Making a commotion. He comes to the well. He looks down in the well. There's his poor horse. And so he makes a tragic assessment. Neither the old well nor the old horse is worth saving. So he calls his neighbors, explains the situation to them. They all get a shovel. And they're just going to bury the horse in the well. Well, the horse goes crazy. He realizes what's going on. But then the horse realizes that every time a shovel load of dirt hits his back, if he'll shimmy a little bit, it'll fall off and become the ground beneath him. This goes on all day. They shovel in the dirt from the shovels. He shimmies. It falls to the ground. He rises a little higher. Until at the end of the day, he's able to step over the wall of the well, none too pleased, I would say, with his farmer and owner, back on to solid ground. And as the story is told, what should have buried him, what should have silenced him, what should have finished him off, was overcome simply by his persistence, by his refusal to go gently into that dark night. Do not go gentle into that good night. That's the line that I see dancing behind the blind Bartimaeus story. The man persisted enough to not be left in the dark. Dylan Thomas was the Welsh poet and writer, the author of that line from a poem by the same name, written for his dying father. It was published in 1952, and it is a great dose of furious defiance and resiliency. Do not go gentle into that good night. Burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my Father, there on the side height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. I didn't warn him that I would say this today, and I hope he listens to it later, because soon enough he will stand right here and tell his story for himself. But joining Bartimaeus, when I hear Dylan Thomas's poem, I now think a whole lot of our own Keith Marika. Keith was diagnosed with both liver failure and respiratory failure this year. Oh, and a couple other small things like an aneurysm behind his liver in the main artery supplying blood to his lower abdomen. Oh, and a hole in his heart, probably there since birth. Months of preparation, weeks of hospitalization, days of lingering between this world and the next, life and death, 20 hours of surgery in rotating surgical teams. And Keith had this triple organ transplant of 2 lungs and a liver while repairing those other minor anomalies as well. I was at his bedside multiple times during the process. And once when I was there, he was on a respirator, intubated. They were cycling his blood from his jugular veins, out one, infusing it with oxygen and sending it back into his body. I counted 9 MDs and PhDs at one point standing around his bed, giving Kathy the game plan ahead. Keith was intubated, restrained, sedated, medicated, and he was still, as my grandmother would say, kicking like a mule, shaking like that horse down in the well, still trying to get up off the bed. They had sedated him so much, they said if we give him any more, it might kill him. But he is still going to get up off the bed and ask questions and try to take over the meeting. And I really think that Keith's kind of lived his life that way sometimes. I could not have done it. I came home from visiting him and I told Cindy, how do you do that? I don't think I have the physical or emotional fortitude for something like that. But as I returned home on my last visit, just before the transplant team took over, and I was chasing the sun westward home on Interstate 10, it was Dylan Thomas who came to me as I thought about Keith. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. How was Bartimaeus' sight restored? How was Keith Marika's health regained? By a power outside themselves. You can count on that. Yet, at the same time, there was this faith-shaped persistence at work. A hope-filled determination. You just keep making noise. You keep shaking off and stepping up on what is threatening to bury you. You keep knocking at the door. You keep being a problem for those who think you should be quiet. You refuse to go gentle into that good night. Now, I am a proponent of surrender. Truly, our refusal to let go of things in our life is more often than not the source of our worst sufferings. We want to change a person, we can't, but we refuse to set boundaries. We want to change ourselves, we can't, but we can't seem to turn our will and our lives over to the God of our understanding either. And on I could go. Yet sometimes in life, we are called to these moments of persistence, refusing to go gentle into the dark, raging against the dying of the light. So you can't let darkness take your hope away. Don't let suffocating fear blind you to all that is good and whole and true and possible in the world. Don't let the crowd talk you out of your faith. This isn't a halftime motivational speech that I'm giving. It isn't some kind of name it and claim it talk. It isn't inspirational woo-woo. Well, if you would just send $100 to the address on your screen, you'll get all you dream of and more. Listen, there is no assurance that you always get what you seek, if ever. There is no guarantee that the door will always open, that your prayer will be answered as you expect it to be, or that your faith will always become sight, to quote an appropriate New Testament turn of phrase. Life is far too unpredictable and exceedingly mysterious for any of that. And anyone trying to tell you different or to try to sell you a warranty is just trying to, if I can use another appropriate phrase, rob you blind. But as people of faith, you have to have a little faith. Tim Hansel was a Christian author that some of us read when we were younger. Hansel graduated from Stanford in the early 1960s, undergrad and graduate school, arriving there on a full football scholarship. When he completed his studies, Stanford offered him a coaching job. But he took a position with Young Life instead, working with high school and college kids, and ultimately founded Summit Expedition, now Summer Adventure. They take kids still to this day, especially those kids who are underserved, who are especially vulnerable. They take them out into the wild. Go camping, rock climbing, kayaking, canoeing, whitewater rafting, glacier jumping. It's experiential, it's cross-cultural, and as the name implies, it's adventurous. And it really saves a lot of kids' lives. It opens them up to a whole new world, maybe outside the inner city or a small town where they live. Tim had to leave and retire from the very organization that he started because he took a horrific fall in the Sierra Madre Mountains and barely survived. And that's when he started writing books. He's got some really good titles. Holy Sweat, You Got to Keep Dancing, How to Become the Best Version of You, Eating Problems for Breakfast, and a really good one, When I Relax, I Feel Guilty. The titles are a little dated, but still helpful if you ever see a copy of Tim Hansel's books. And here's a paragraph or two that I want to close with that hits the target. Pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. This in no way diminishes difficulties, only that we all choose our response to suffering. We can attempt to avoid pain, or we can have the faith and courage to live. I love this. You can eat bland food so as to avoid an ulcer. Drink no tea or coffee or other stimulants in the name of health. Go to bed early and stay away from the nightlife. Avoid all controversial subjects. Spend money only on the necessities. And still, you could fall and break your neck in the bathtub and it would serve you right. Most of us have enough excuses to last a lifetime. And the sooner we let go of them and get on with living, the better off we are.